putting their own name behind it, Netherlands coin or something like that, creates a very interesting idea, because then again, if you've got social purposes behind your government's use of funds, and what the government is intending to try to finance, governments are free to use a cryptocurrency medium to be able to accomplish that. In the same way that a charitable organization that has a particular goal in mind and wants to generate a source of revenue to further that goal might consider becoming a creator of a crypto coin and then promoting its use, because if that value increases, they'll have a greater asset base to promote their own particular political or social or charitable goal. So it's an interesting idea that it really allows the parties that are involved in creation to really decide what their purpose is in using the market. And the exchange itself, the technology, is completely agnostic. It doesn't care what the purpose was behind it. It's simply there to provide the facility to effectuate the changes.
Would you recommend the American Monetary Institute then to start its own cryptocurrency? And would that be harmonious with our goal, or would that be strangely contradictory?
I don't think it would be contradictory at all, because I think that in the classic free market sense, I believe as many people as want to should create their own coin, and then the market will decide which ones are successful and which ones fail, as it should. The purpose of this is you're not going to get a good coin because it's backed by a good government. Instead, you'll get a good coin because it's been adopted and accepted by the users. And to me, that's what a medium of exchange should be. It should have value built in because the parties that use it trust it, rely on it, and want to use it, not because a government authority is the one who has said, we're backing this and therefore it's good. Yes?
What about hacking? And I saw in your presentation where somebody made a mistake and lost $300 million, disappeared.
What about that sort of thing? The hacking and criminal activity via computer technology.
The concept behind the encryption and the technology is to prevent someone from being able to manipulate the blockchain, but that doesn't mean that they can't manipulate the computers on which the blockchain is being used. In exactly the same way as when you effectuate a purchase from Amazon, Amazon has its own internal protections and safeguards, but that doesn't mean that as you try to use the computer at the local Starbucks, and it's a Wi-Fi system, and there's a hacker at the Starbucks who's capturing your password, that there wouldn't be a way to go around the system. So clearly, technology has its pros and its cons. And to your point, the blockchain technology is designed to create electronic protection to a core element, namely the transaction itself, but it can't help with respect to someone who hacks into your computer to get your password, to access your system, or someone who robs you and steals your hot wallet. If your hot wallet is stored on a thumb drive, that can be stolen as easily as anyone's thumb drive. And so, to your point, there are definite benefits, I think, to the use of the technology, but those only go so far. Yes? I'm sorry.
I have a question, yeah.
Sure.
And it's about your answer to Govert's first question, and that's about the environmental impact in terms of the use of computer power. And what I heard you say is that as the Bitcoin mining it comes to an end, then somehow the computer power requirements will be less. But doesn't the validation, which is the fundamental aspect of the mining, still have to continue for all the transactions?
It does. The validation process itself continues, but the part of the validation process is the creation of the coin that's being used to reward the miners today. And that element is what will disappear. So to the point, we're talking about a hypothetical. We don't know how much of a drop in computing power will actually be realized when there is no longer new coin to be minted in connection with the process. But you're absolutely right. The validation itself is still something that's going to be undertaken. What we've already seen, though, even in the last few years, is that with the higher grade computers that are there and the more specific interfaces, particularly the chips and the cards that have been developed now just for mining purposes, that we're already seeing a drop in some of those uses. Where we're not seeing it is because as the coins get closer to their cap level, it becomes increasingly difficult, meaning you need more firepower within the computing system to be able to do the validation. But that's the process that will disappear once the cap is reached and new coin minted will not be part of the process. Yes?
I disagree with that, because actually the money creation or the coin creation is just, it doesn't need any computational power. The computational power is being used for validating the transactions, and the coin creation is just one of the processes that is being done. And if this falls out, it doesn't change anything with regard to the energy consumption. So it's just, if you enter a number or you don't enter the number, but the validation process still needs to be done. And it will consume more energy because the market, which is existing for validating, is getting more competitive and more competitive due to the new technology and the new hardware. The hardware is getting faster, so everybody else needs to buy more hardware, and everything gets faster, so it consumes more energy and all that. So this will not stop. It will, to my mind, it will keep rising.
And again, as I say, the beauty of this technology is we'll find out what happens as these future events occur. Yes?
My question is about the blockchain technology, and as I understand it, in its generic uses, it creates chains of blocks of information that add security, because it would be impossible with this distributed chain everywhere to replicate it. So I'm curious, in the currencies, would I be able to look at a Bitcoin or any of the currencies and look back on its entire transaction history if I could understand the algorithm?
The answer is yes, it is a complete history. And so each transaction is added to an existing base, but it in no way subtracts from or reduces the information that's there. So yes, it is literally a life of transaction history, if you wanted to examine it.
Would anyone be able to read that?
Would anyone know? Would some people? Yes, because again, remember, there are no names associated with that. It's the transactions. So you'd be able to see that a particular Bitcoin transaction of X amount went from this location to that location, and that would be the extent of the information that would be available publicly, assuming you were not one of the parties involved in the transaction.
How is it locating?
What do you mean, how's it located?
Well, it's identifying the location. It's identifying a computer. It's identifying
A number.
An address.
An address.
Yes, an outlet address. Yes.
I'd like to comment on the use of power. There's a principle of economics with respect to contests. And the coin goes whoever gets there first. And it's a competitive industry. So what you can say is that in equilibrium, the amount of cost spent working out a transaction will be equal to the value that is given to the person who solves it. So if you wanted to reduce the energy consumption, one way of doing so would be to reduce the reward. If you reduce the reward, people will drop out and the energy waste will drop out.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, we're already starting to see that. It's called, in some transactions, they refer to it as gas in the industry, as what you have to put in order to get a transaction to be processed. And you are seeing competing platforms offering different gas charges, in part because some are trying to discourage widespread use and reduce the energy consumption. Others are more willing to kind of throw open to the market and let the highest price be the one that undertakes. But you're exactly right. You can actually, depending upon your objectives, manipulate the amount that is going to be paid in connection with validating a transaction and use that as a basis for really operating your chain, and if you're successful, because again, it's all a question of users, then you'll attract more users because you're basically capping the amount of reward that's going to be achieved by anyone who's going through the validation. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so can you tell us how much energy or demand is being placed on the electrical grid by having this technology in place right now?
It's a difficult question to answer because much of the mining itself is now outside the United States. And it's being done in locations that are more difficult to monitor or to get reliable information. So I can't give you a good hard number. You in the back, sir, have any idea?
About the energy consumption?
About the energy,
On the
consumption
electrical
cost.
grid.
On the grid.
How much kilowatts or
How much
watts?
is paid
Go to an
per
interesting
transaction?
website.
It varies. There is no uniform fund.
For Bitcoin?
I'd have to look. I couldn't tell you what the current number is.
You can go to an interesting website. You can Google Digiconomist. It's called Digiconomist. It's a website that shows graphically how much the Bitcoin and also Bitcoin and Ethereum, how much energy it is consuming right now. It's put in comparison to other countries.
We're at that level. We're at a national.
It's really interesting.
Consumes as much as a whole country, like Switzerland, for instance. So it's not a cost issue; it's a kilowatt issue.
I was just double checking because I know it's a really huge issue in Oregon, but I really haven't been following along. But the hydroelectric power on the Columbia River is very cheap. It's just a few cents per kilowatt. The article I just found, like one data mining company in the Dalles is using as much electricity as a small town. And they're also, they're producing heat that's having an impact on the town. I'm not totally conversant, but I'm aware that there's a really big issue in Oregon about all the Bitcoin miners flocking to the Columbia River.
It's a gold rush.
Right.
Well, this is fascinating. I saw that they actually sell heaters. They're Bitcoin computers. You can actually use them for domestic heat. Yeah. I'd also like to know what is up with the number theoretical thing of mining Bitcoins, and what is that have some social benefit, and is it just has to be hard enough that it's hard to do?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It creates global warmth, so that's good, isn't it? Maybe I gotta get back.
It can vary, the difficulty can be varied.
Yes. And it can be varied even within a particular coin over time. And so again, there's no static, uniform consistency because all these numbers are ones that can be varied depending upon the usage, depending upon the original developers, and depending upon consensus within the group. There are ways that you can actually, if you achieve sufficient control in a non-widely circulated coin context, there are potentials to effectively assert kind of the centralized control that this entire system was designed to avoid. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, that was fantastic. And now we've got Manuel Klein. He's also been working in this space, as they call it, and it's a very, it's got a lot of potential. Bitcoin was like the first iteration, and you can sort of think of it a bit like the Wright brothers biplane, and then how aircraft have developed since then. It takes time, and there are a lot more. There are many different ways of reaching this consensus, and And there are options out there that you know, they market themselves at least as being more altruistic. There's proof of care. There's various different ways. It's not necessarily proof of work, like going down a mine and working. There could be rewards for doing something good, some social benefit. The algorithms can be written in any way that the designers want, you know. So it's an evolving thing, and I think it's very interesting. And thanks again to Doug for enlightening us on some of these issues. And Manuel, are you ready to come up?
Yeah.
Oh, you're there. Okay. All right. Have you got a stick?
Yeah.
Oh, Doug, have you got your stick? You've got it? Okay, good.
I do, Jamie.
Thank you.
There's another stand that's stuck to me, I'm sure I can write it down.
Is this, yeah, that's the content.
That's mine.
That's yours?
This is yours.
Okay, so I have not prepared any slides. I think we can also do it quite openly, and if you have questions, I can try to answer them. We can continue with the questions you have on cryptocurrencies or whatever. So my background in this is that I was quite interested in the technology in the last 2 years, so to say, and I've read a lot and came across the implications, or I was interested a lot with regard to the implications of the technology on the current money system, also how central bank could actually use it for crypto digital cash, for example. I worked on a thesis, on a master thesis on exactly that topic. So how could the technology actually influence the current money system? I dropped it because it was just too much work, and I wanted to include like basically everything into a thesis of 50 pages. And then I was in Chile, and everything was a little bit too much, so I decided to drop it and do another one. However, it is still a very interesting topic to me, and that's why I contacted a professor of this blockchain center at this Frankfurt University basically 1 year ago, and ever since we were in contact. And after I finished my master's in May, he contacted me and offered me this job as a project leader at his blockchain center, organizing a big conference. I can show you the website of the conference. I was talking about it with some of you yesterday already. It happened on Monday and Tuesday this week, so it was a lot of stress and a lot of work before that. But it all worked fine. We had 52 speakers, so a 2-day conference. It was there were a lot of people from big crypto coins, one of the leading crypto coins in the market, yeah, it doesn't load, but anyway. It was an interesting experience because I mean, I also come from the sovereign money background, so to say. So I find it very interesting how people believe that a privately run currency, or that currency competition could bring out a stable currency, because I think it's quite questionable that this will ever happen, because the demand and supply with regard to those cryptocurrencies, how they call it, result in very, very highly fluctuating prices. So you don't really have a stable value in that, whatever that type is, whatever that thing is. I don't like to call it currency. Since there is no stable value, you can't really use it as a currency. So here you can see IOTA, Cardano, Dash, NEO. These are one of the biggest cryptocurrencies there are on the planet. We've had representatives of these. Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter. It was a lot of work and a very interesting experience. And also this crypto sphere is very interesting because there's a lot of hype. There are a lot of people that believe that they're the new masters of the universe, but actually the projects don't really bring forth really like real economic projects. It's all hype. It's all ideas, and it's all a lot of expectations. But so far, it really hasn't brought out some viable projects. Yeah, so these were my experiences. It's been a very interesting experience, and I'm still in it. Yeah, but the technology I find very interesting, and I wanted to clear some questions that came up, because I think the technology makes it possible for the first time to actually have digital value-based money. I don't know if you want to call it money, but let's keep the term money. Because usually, so we have account-based money and value-based money. And value-based money has only been physical cash, because physical cash is not located in any account. And nobody knows where this physical cash actually circulates. You only see it in the central bank balance sheet as part of their liabilities, but even the central bank doesn't know where this money actually fluctuates or where it's located at. And with digital money, such as the bank-created credit, it's always account-based, so you know where the money is located at. And the technology is enabling it to, to have the digital value-based money, if you want to call it money. Yeah? So that came to my mind when I listened to all these questions. So that's basically the main idea of the technology, to have it a value-based money where nobody has really control over it. Only he or she who owns it, or who has the possession of it. And we were talking a lot about the energy consumption, which is an issue. However, the energy consumption of Bitcoin, for example, is only happening due to the consensus mechanism Bitcoin uses. So Jamie started to talk about this, and I think this is quite important to understand. So the heart of any cryptocurrency is consensus mechanism it's used. So why do cryptocurrencies need consensus mechanism? It's because usually when you have a centralized system where there's a bank or a central bank deciding if these two steps, if the sender of the money has an equivalent amount of the money he wants to send over to the counterparty. I mean, if he wants to send X, he needs at least X in his account. So this is one information the trusted third party in a centralized system would look at and confirm. And then, of course, if he sends the amount X, then his account should be, then X should be subtracted from his account, and X should be added to the account of the recipient. And these services, let's keep it in services, in a centralized system are done by a bank or a central bank. But in a decentralized system, you need to find a way of how to provide this consensus that these transactions have actually happened. And the Bitcoin proof of work mechanism is one of the few consensus mechanisms there are. It has always been the only one until, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Other consensus mechanisms have come up, such as proof of stake, for example. But proof of work consumes this amount of energy. So this is basically the crux of Bitcoin. And however, this consensus mechanism, due to the or due to the extreme energy consumption, is quite safe, and it has never been hacked. In the entire history of Bitcoin, it has never been hacked. And it is actually really, really hard to hack it, because you would, if you wanted to hack it, you would need more than 50% of the computing power of the whole network that is validating the transactions, and this is nearly impossible. So what is the proof of work, and also the puzzle and the computational puzzle that needs to be solved? There was a question of you, sir, at the back, if this is something socially valuable that can be solved there. And so if you want to understand what this computational puzzle is, you will have to go back to the hashing algorithm all the cryptocurrencies use. And it's basically, you can imagine this as information that goes into an algorithm. So it can be, for example, 2 letters only, M and K, for example, from Manuel Klein. And these 2 letters, M, K, produce certain amounts of digits, let's say 30 digits. And these 30 digits are a hash algorithm. So these 2 digits, MK, were hashed through this algorithm, and then they produce a 30-digit number. And if I put M and K, these 2 digits, into the hash algorithm, it will always produce the same 30 digits. Yeah? If I put in M and L, for example, these 30 digits would be completely different. Completely different. And now you can put in, for example, 50,000 digits as an input, and it will produce 30 digits, the hash algorithm. And if you only changed 1 single digit of the 30,000 digits you put into the algorithm, the 30 digits that come out of the algorithm look completely different. So if you insert the same 30,000 digits, you will always receive the same 30 hash digits. And if only 1 digit of the input is being changed, the number looks completely different. And this proof of work mechanism of Bitcoin now uses several information. It uses the information of all the transactions that have been taking place in this block that needs to be validated. It takes another information, which is the time. So you need, in a blockchain, you need timestamps of every block, because it has to be clear that a transaction A took place before transaction B. Then you take, as it is a chain of blocks, you take the hash algorithm of the prior block also as an information. And then, let's keep it like this, you have 3 informations, and these 3 informations are put into a hash algorithm, and then there comes, a number comes out. And the aim of this proof of work now is to use a 4th input factor, and this input factor is changed iteratively. The aim of the whole process is that the hash algorithm of the 30 digits starts, for example, with 12 zeros. And that's basically the aim of proof of work. So it's completely nonsense. It's completely, there's no real question or real puzzle behind it. It's just an iterative process. So you take these 3 fixed informations, so the time, all the transactions that have been taking place, and the hash of the prior block, and then you add a 4th information, and this information is completely random. So you run through a lot of random computations, and somehow, on average, every 10 minutes, you receive a hash algorithm of 30 digits, which starts with 12 zeros. And then you say, okay, I found it. And that's basically the proof of work mechanism. So it's completely useless in the sense of trying to solve something important. However, it's really, really secure, because those that
do the mining, those that validate, have an incentive to only validate valid information because they spend enormous amounts of energy. So they have to really pay it. So this gives them an incentive to only validate valid transactions because you can backtrack when you have the 30 digits. You can backtrack it really, really easily and see if all the transactions were indeed valid. So I hope this was understandable. It's quite complex and complicated, but that's basically the proof of work mechanism that is used by Bitcoin. And there are other consensus mechanisms, such as proof of stake, where those that have enormous amounts of Bitcoin, for example, but I mean, Bitcoin is not using that consensus mechanism, but Ethereum wants to do it, they want to use it. So those that have big amounts of Ether in their wallet, they of course have an incentive that this Ether keeps its value. So they should also have an incentive to only validate valid transactions, because if they validated invalid transactions, the trust in the blockchain protocol would diminish, and therefore the value of their assets. So that's another way of coming to a consensus which does not consume that amount of energy. So the crux of the energy consumption is basically the consensus mechanism. And I wanted to show you this website, Economist, because this makes it very, very well visible. It's the Bitcoin energy consumption. There you go. And it compares the consumption of the mining of Bitcoin. And oh yeah, we had the discussion a couple of minutes ago whether or not the energy consumption would keep or would stay high even if the Bitcoin, the maximum amount of Bitcoin was reached. It would stay high because the reward for mining or for validating the transactions is receiving new Bitcoins. However, the process of creating these Bitcoins is just, it's a keystroke. It doesn't consume energy. What consumes energy is the validating process through the consensus mechanism I just described. So here we see that the Bitcoin protocol now consumes more energy annually than Austria, more than Chile, more than Czech Republic, and is about to consume more energy than the Philippines, close to Venezuela, close to Finland. And what is even more impressive is when you take Bitcoin and Ethereum together. Ethereum is the third largest cryptocurrency right now. So you see here Bitcoin and Ethereum together, and it would be the 34th largest energy consumption in the world with regard to, or in comparison to two countries. So more than Pakistan, more than Belgium, and close to United, to the United Arabian Emirates. So the energy consumption is extremely high, and it will keep rising. I'm quite sure about that, because the market of the hardware is still developing, and as long as the hardware is getting faster and faster, the difficulty of the proof of work will adjust automatically, because the aim of the Bitcoin network is to have a new block found every 10 minutes. And the variable that can be adjusted to make sure that every 10 minutes there's a new block found is the difficulty of the proof of work. And this is the number of zeros at the beginning of the hash of the 30 digits that needs to be found. So right now I think it's 12 zeros, and you can adjust the number, you can adjust the difficulty by the number of zeros that need to be found at the beginning. This is a random number. I mean, it's just an iterative process. You can also say 12 ones or 12 fives need to be found. Yeah. What else did I write down? It's the comparison between sovereign money and cryptocurrencies. And this is basically the main theme or the main topic I wanted to include at the conference that I'm organizing at the end of November. Because both monetary reforms, you could say, so sovereign money and cryptocurrencies, both are aiming at asset-based money. So right now we live in a debt-based money system where new money is most of the time created through additional loans, therefore additional debt. Sovereign money wants to end that, and certainly cryptocurrencies already ended that if you label them money or if you label them currency. As it is not a claim on anybody, it just exists on the ledger as an asset, and those are, so to say, the parallels. Sovereign money would be an asset issued by the state or the government, and cryptocurrencies are an asset that are produced, issued by the private sector. So anybody that wants to issue it can issue it. But those are basically the parallels. Yeah? State issued or privately issued asset-backed money. Or not asset-backed, but asset-based money. Yeah? But I doubt that currency competition, and there are also studies on that a currency competition, which is basically the economic theory behind cryptocurrencies, so it's Austrian economics, denationalization of money. Friedrich von Hayek wrote this book. And basically cryptocurrencies is the incarnation, you could say, of his theory, because there has never been something like this. I mean, you could go back to the free banking area, where banks were issuing banknotes as assets, but this is a long time ago. And the technology makes it possible to transfer assets without intermediaries, but also have value directly transferred between peers without intermediaries. And there are studies that state that never ever will currency competition create a stable currency, because the fluctuating demand and supply is always affecting the price of the currency. And so the first or the third or the second function of money, however you want to see it, which is a stable medium of exchange, and also the store of value is never ever really provided, so to say, by cryptocurrencies and also by currency competition. And and I wrote down the hashing, proof of work, we already talked about that. One last thing maybe, I think the technology is quite interesting because it provides a possibility to actually transfer value without relying on a trusted third party. This does not necessarily have to be money. This can be any type of value. So there are a lot of projects, for example, where companies use distributed ledger technology in logistics. You can trade any types of assets on it, so shares, bonds, derivatives, whatever. The energy market actually is a quite interesting field where distributed ledger technology could be applied. So you would then tokenize energy and directly trade energy against each other. Then you would demonetize, so to say, the energy, because then energy would not be priced with a price tag of euros or dollars or whatever, but you would directly trade energy, so kilowatts, and you could tokenize the kilowatts. So there are a lot of different applications of the technology out of the money sphere, and that's what is interesting to me. Basically also Bitcoin, to my mind, it cannot be labeled as a currency, as money, as whatever. However, Bitcoin is quite interesting because you can actually use it as a transfer of value, whatever that value is. But it works. It has never been hacked. You can do it. If you want to do it, you can transfer that value, whatever that value is. And so it has some value. I don't know what that value is, but it has some value because you can do it. And it does work, even though it's not money. And I think this is what also academics now is debating, how the academics and regulators are arguing right now, how you could actually put Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies into any regulatory framework, and how you could actually see them, what they really are, because you can't really see it, you can't really label it as a commodity, you can't really label it as a security, and neither as money or currency, because it doesn't fulfill any of the three functionalities. But yeah, it's an interesting technology. A lot of times you hear that we're still, or that it's still in its infancy, even though it's already 10 years old. But there are a lot of other different technologies. For example, DAG, it's called Directed Acyclical Graph. So it's not a blockchain anymore, where you have transactions bundled in blocks and chained together, but where a lot of transactions are bundled in like a huge flow of transactions, and that is also scalable. So you have, it's possible to transact like thousands of transactions a second. And so these technologies are still in its infancy. Bitcoin has proved to work, not as a currency, not as a money, but as whatever type of value transaction, so to say. Yeah, so these are my words on that topic, and hope that was interesting. Thank you.
So if a government decided to use cryptocurrency as sovereign money after monetary reform, could the Internal Revenue Service have access to my account? Or, in other words, does the government lose complete control over money that is ledger-based like that?
Well, it all depends on the design, I would say, because of course a centrally banked cryptocurrency would need a proof of work consensus mechanism that would be completely stupid. I mean, you could have central institutions that validate the transactions. You could provide a market in that too. There's a study we were talking about yesterday of two scientists of Great Britain. They've put forth a study that includes min-tents, they call them. They have a market of 30 players in that, and those could be, for example, banks that actually validate the transactions, but they're accountable on that. And then you wouldn't have this energy consumption and all that. And then you could still have wallets where you are the only one who can access it, or you could have an account-based money system where you have an account at some other third party. It's all possible. And so far...
What I was asking is, can the government seize my account if I owe tax to the government and it's in that form?
This also still depends on the design of the system. So if the government wants to have control over your account, it can have it. Then it can design it like this.
I see.
If not,
then not. Manuel, do you know if anybody's keeping track in terms of the activity in either Bitcoin or any other combination thereof, whether or not the amount of the transactions that are going for actually transferring goods and services from the buyer to a seller, how that compares to the transactions that are just related to the buying and the selling of the Bitcoin itself. Is there information on that?
I don't have specific information on that, but I'm really sure that the amount of transactions that are taking place with regard to really buying and selling of goods and assets is very, very low. So the majority would be purely speculative.
The information is out there. The number of retailers has hugely dropped.
Yeah.
Who are willing to accept it because there's no stable value.
There's no stable. Since it's not a unit of account, nothing is labeled or what would you call it, valued in Bitcoin. So if you want to buy this table, for example, you know that it costs $100, but right now $100 is like whatever, let's say 600 Bitcoins, but right now it's 603. Right now it's 580. So it's really frustrating, and I mean it works. The whole system works if you and the counterparty would call each other before doing the transaction. Say, okay, I will transact now. And then, for example, if your counterparty sits in Venezuela, it does work quite well. So you would call them, say, hey, I send over the Bitcoins now. Then the Bitcoins are transferred. Actually, right now, it takes quite a long time to transfer it. It used to be quite fast, but now it can take for hours. And also, in the highs of the Bitcoin hype, so to say, the transaction cost